Episode 24, Guard Physical Access to Cardholder Areas Relentlessly, we shift into the assessor's mindset and focus on visible, verifiable defenses that keep unauthorized hands off systems and media without turning facilities into theater. The Payment Card Industry Professional, PCIP, exam expects you to recognize when an organization's controls reduce real risk and produce convincing evidence, not just signs and slogans. Strong physical security for payment systems is a chain of small, concrete safeguards that start at the door and extend to every console, cable, and storage container inside the boundary. The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, treats those safeguards as integral to protecting the confidentiality and integrity of cardholder data, because physical access often bypasses even the best technical defenses. Your task as an assessor is to look for controls that operate every day, leave a trustworthy trail, and make it hard for mistakes to hide. When that trail exists, you can judge adequacy with confidence and explain your reasoning in plain terms that stand up to scrutiny. Clarity begins with scope you can point at. Cardholder data environment rooms, locked cabinets, and media safes should be defined in writing, labeled in the physical world, and tied to a current inventory that names responsible stewards. Labels and maps are not decoration. They are the bridge between policy and reality, allowing any reviewer to find the boundary, verify what assets sit inside, and ask the right person about their condition. When stewards are identified by name and role, accountability becomes practical. Someone signs for maintenance windows, someone answers for visitor behavior, and someone owns the daily checks that keep drift from creeping in. The exam looks for your ability to insist on scope artifacts and then connect them to what you see on a walkthrough. If rooms and containers are not clearly identified, the rest of the control story will be unstable because nobody can verify where protections begin or who is supposed to maintain them. Visitors introduce risk because they bring unfamiliar identities into controlled spaces, and the fix is a routine that never turns into a guess. Proper procedures require escort at all times, a log that captures name, company, purpose, arrival, and departure, temporary badges that signal limited rights, and clear restrictions on zones within the facility. In assessment terms, you confirm that the process is not just printed on a poster, but reflected in recent entries, matching sign-ins to escort assignments and to camera footage when appropriate. If the organization serves vendors regularly, look for pre-approval patterns that still produce on-the-day controls rather than rubber stamp access. The exam wants you to see the difference between a friendly culture and a permissive one. Friendliness has escorts who understand their duty and logs that make sense later. Permissiveness lets people blend in with lanyards and good intentions while controls go soft at busy moments. Inside the boundary, small surfaces matter because attackers love the quiet path. Securing consoles, ports, and cables is less about heavy locks and more about making tampering obvious and access predictable. Closed racks with keyed or coded doors, blanking panels for unused bays, disabled interfaces in device configurations, and tamper-evident indicators on exposed panels turn opportunistic access into a risky, noisy act. As an assessor, you look for consistency. A pattern of sealed plates where a certain model exposes a dangerous port, a ticket that records a seal replacement with the reason and date, and device configuration baselines that show unused interfaces disabled by default. When people argue that internal risk is low, the correct exam answer focuses on the fact that physical attacks often begin with the smallest, least defended connector. Good practice makes those connectors either unavailable or obviously disturbed, which is how you catch trouble early. Point-of-sale and field devices require special attention because they live in messy, human spaces where fatigue and routine erode vigilance. Seals, cages, and serial number reconciliation form a practical trio. Tamper evidence seals show when a device has been opened. Cages prevent casual removal, and serial checks ensure that a swapped unit does not blend into the background. The assessment lens looks for a cadence, daily or shift-based visual checks, periodic reconciliations that compare inventory lists to what sits on counters and in service kits, and a procedure for what happens when a number does not match. Evidence here includes photos from recent checks, discrepancy logs with outcomes, and training records that show clerks understand what a broken seal means. The exam expects you to connect the importance of field discipline to fraud risk because rogue readers and tiny insertions are still among the most effective ways to intercept card data in the wild. Media remains both portable and potent, and that combination demands tight storage and clear chain of custody. Locked containers should hold backups, installation media, and any removable storage used near the cardholder data environment, and access should be limited to named custodians. Each movement of media is a small story with a date, a purpose, a signature, and a destination, and the story should be legible months later when someone needs to understand how and why data moved. As an assessor, you spot weak chains when sign-offs are missing, when the same person requests and approves access, or when returns occur without matching entries. The right proof is mundane but strong: a shelf photo that matches an inventory list, a logbook with readable handwriting and consistent fields, and retention rules that make old entries easy to find. The exam frames this as evidence-first thinking. If you cannot tell where media has been, you cannot trust that it remained protected. Workstations are often the closest surface to the public, so controlling what someone can see or touch is part of protecting cardholder data. Auto-lock policies that trigger quickly, screen orientations that face away from public view, privacy filters where counters invite glances, and cable routing that keeps ports out of reach combine into a defense that feels natural to staff and inconvenient to outsiders. An assessor confirms settings through screenshots of group policies, brief tests at terminals, and a walk-around that looks for sloppy placement or missing filters at busy stations. The point is not to make work awkward, it is to remove easy opportunities to view or attach, because most attempts begin with whatever sits in plain sight. In exam terms, you are expected to recognize that workstation exposure counts as physical access when it breaks the boundary between people and data, even if the operating system claims to be locked down. Alarms and cameras are supporting actors that become heroes only when they integrate and retain evidence well. Sensitive spaces should trigger alarms on unusual door states, after-hours movement, or perimeter breaches. And cameras should cover entry points, racks, and media cabinets with images that are clear enough to identify people and actions. Retention matters because investigations rarely begin the same day, and legal and policy obligations may require longer storage for certain zones. Assessors verify that alarm events link to response procedures, and that camera timestamps align with the badge system so that timelines make sense. The exam will test whether you understand that technology without correlation is fragile. It is the cross-reference between systems that turns raw footage and beeps into a coherent account of what happened and who was responsible. Identity is a river that changes daily, so access events must reconcile against human resource status changes at a regular, short interval. Weekly is a baseline that many organizations can sustain. Faster is better when turnover is high or when contractors rotate frequently. The control you evaluate is simple. When someone changes roles or leaves, their physical rights change or end in step, and the badge system can prove it. Assessors sample recent separations and transfers, compare the effective dates to badge revocations and group changes, and look for exceptions that suggest manual follow-up. Weakness reveals itself as drift, badges that remain active days after exits, contractors whose end dates moved without approval, or access restored ad hoc after hours without recorded reason. The exam expects you to prefer reconciled automation over heroics, because repeatable linkage between systems is what keeps risk low when people are busy. Surprise walkthroughs reveal the difference between policy and practice in a way no report can. When you enter a facility unannounced and look for propped doors, tailgating, missing signage, or unattended consoles, you see how controls behave during pressure and routine, not during demonstrations. The assessor's skill here is observation with purpose, noting how staff challenge unfamiliar faces, whether delivery routes pierce sensitive zones, and how quickly a concern reaches someone who can act. Findings should lead to immediate fixes when simple issues appear, or to tickets that track work when the problem requires coordination. The exam values this habit because it anchors your judgment in the physical truth of a place, not only in the documents that describe it, and because small frictions you see today often prevent bigger incidents tomorrow. Media destruction is the last control in the chain, and it must be as deliberate as the first. Retired drives, tapes, and printed extracts should meet approved methods such as witness shredding, degaussing, or destruction by certified vendors whose processes produce serial numbered receipts. The assessor verifies that methods match media types, that custody remains controlled until the moment of destruction, and that certificates or logs exist to tie each destroyed item to a date and a method. Common shortcuts fail here: informal disposal without witness, commingled bins with office waste, or unverified vendor claims that break the chain of trust. The correct exam perspective is that destruction is not an administrative afterthought, but a control that closes risk definitively, and therefore it demands the same quality of evidence as entry control at the front door. Evidence collection is the thread that turns individual safeguards into a credible program. Badge logs, visitor registers, footage access records, inspection forms, seal replacement tickets, media chain of custody pages, and destruction certificates must be organized so an assessor can follow a single event across systems. The organization does not need fancy dashboards to pass this test. It needs consistent identifiers, readable timestamps, and retention that supports investigations and audits without fishing expeditions. When evidence lives in one place per control and explains itself without a tour guide, you know the program can survive staff turnover and busy seasons. The exam rewards your ability to name the exact artifacts that would prove a claim, and to describe how you would sample them to test the control's operation. In that skill, you demonstrate the heart of an assessor's craft. Even the strongest program requires humility and iteration. Facilities change, tenants move, field devices rotate, and teams learn hard lessons from minor incidents that never made headlines. Your role is to look for feedback loops: signage updated after a confusion point, escort routes adjusted to reduce temptation, seals redesigned to resist a clever bypass, or storage practices simplified so busy staff can comply without effort. Good programs measure small things: door-held alarms per week, visitor log corrections per month, serial reconciliations that found a mismatch, and then decide specific actions rather than sweeping statements. The exam looks for that practical intelligence, a sense that robust physical security is a living system, not a static checklist, and that evidence of change in response to observation is a mark of strength, not weakness. Finally, the best control is the one that exists by the end of the day, which is why concrete next steps matter in both practice and assessment. Schedule a physical walkthrough today with the explicit goal of finding and fixing one real gap, no matter how small. Document the visit, the observation, the corrective action, and the evidence that shows the fix took hold, then place that record where future reviews will see it. This single action does more for program health than a dozen aspirational memos, because it teaches the organization to connect eyes-on reality to durable improvement. In exam language, you are choosing verifiable outcomes over promises, which is precisely the habit the certification hopes to cultivate in professionals who safeguard payment systems. Physical security for cardholder areas succeeds when it is tangible, disciplined, and explainable, and when every safeguard leaves a breadcrumb others can follow. Within PCI DSS, that means defined boundaries, controlled entry, trusted visitor handling, hardened interiors, monitored spaces, reconciled identities, surprise verification, deliberate destruction, and a habit of preserving proof. For the PCIP exam, the lens is always the same. Can you recognize a design that reduces risk? Can you name the artifacts that prove it works? And can you differentiate between a claim and a control in operation? If you can do those three things, you will evaluate facilities with calm confidence and help organizations close the last mile where data meets doors, desks, and hands. And if you start with a single walkthrough today, you will already be moving from theory to the kind of evidence that makes assessment straightforward and keeps customers safe. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.